So I'm going to go ahead, Johnny, and introduce you. And then when Andressa comes in with the scenes, then we'll jump into the questions, okay?
Sure.
I'm going to have to read this because there's so many amazing things here that I didn't know about you, and now I do. But Johnny Lorenz is the son of Brazilian immigrants. He's a poet, translator, and a professor of English at Montclair University, State University. He received his PhD in English from the University of Texas at Austin in 2000. His book of poems, Education by Windows, was published by Poets and Traders Press in 2018. He has translated 2 novels by Clarice Lispector, A Breath of Life in 2012. Thank you for that, Johnny, because it was great. Finalist of the Best Translated Book, and The Besieged City in 2019, also amazing. Named one of the best books of 2019 by Vanity Fair. Both novels were published by New Directions, our great partner. He has been awarded a Fulbright grant in 2003 to translate the poetry of Mario Quintana. That's what I didn't know. That's beautiful. As well as the Panheim Translation Fund grant in 2020 to complete his translations of Notebook of Return by Emilson de Almeida Pereira. And Lorenz is working on a manuscript of new original poems entitled Incantations. Amazing. I had to read that. I was afraid I was not going to remember the whole thing.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely.
And I should say, Viva Clarice.
Viva Clarice.
Viva Clarice. Yeah.
So, Johnny, let's start with our first question. Like, what is, aside from being, a son of Brazilian immigrants, right? So you already have contact with Brazil, of course. But how does your story with Clarice started? Like, how did this passion started?
Well, we'll begin with the word passion because you know that one of her most famous novels is The Passion According to G.H., A Paixão Segundo GH. And if you know that book, you know that has a very famous first page where she says, this book is meant for people with fully formed souls. And if you don't have it, maybe don't even read the book. And I have to admit, I was not ready. The first time I read that book, I was not ready. So maybe my soul wasn't fully formed. But when I was living in Austin, Texas, doing my graduate work, I was in a little bookstore. There were more bookstores then. So just a word to say, remember to support your local bookstore. I was at a very famous Austin bookstore called Half Price Books, where it's one of those bookstores that you just walk in. In Brazil, it would be the sebo, right? Like you walk in and you don't have any idea what you're gonna find. You just walk in and whatever happens, happens, right? And you make your little discovery and you feel good about yourself because you always get a good deal. And as it happens, this is in Texas, and I was just wandering through the store. It's a big sort of warehouse space on Guadalupe Avenue in Austin, Texas. And there was a used copy in the original Portuguese, of A Descoberta do Mundo, which was in Portuguese. So,
wow.
So I don't know, fortuitous, right? It was very strange. This was a collection of all of Clarice's crónicas, all of her short pieces that she wrote for Jornal do Brasil. Mm-hmm. And it was, I don't know how big that book is, it was like that. And I read that book cover to cover, and that really was my real introduction to Clarice.
It was meant to be, because for a book to be in Austin in Portuguese, mm-hmm. or a man that speaks Portuguese as well as English, to find that, it's like, wow.
Yeah. And my Portuguese was like, it really benefited from that book, because I remember spending a summer just reading that book. And, you know, it's not like if I mean, now I think it's a little easier because of the virtual environments we have. But in the early 90s, it wasn't really, if you were in Texas, you weren't necessarily getting a lot of Portuguese in your day-to-day life.
Right.
And so that was really my diving deep into the world of Clarice. And actually we began talking today about her sitting with the typewriter at 5 in the morning and with a cigarette. What I love about those chronicas is that they're all these little stories where she makes you aware of herself in the process of writing. So she'll say things like, I'm listening to Chopin with a typewriter in my lap, and I'm putting out my cigarette, and Ulysses, the dog, is barking in the background, and I have a toothache. And like, you're just always aware of the simultaneity of reading, where you feel like you're with her, even though you're not, because she makes you sort of feel like you're there with her in that moment of creation.
And it's also very human, right? I have a toothache. I have my coffee here. And I think that's one of the things that Andressa always says. It feels like Clarice is always whispering in your ear a little bit when she does those kinds of comments in her books. And then I want to already pull you into A Breath of Life and Besieged City, but more into A Breath of Life, for something you just said, which is this same comments, you know. There's an author in A Breath of Life writing a character, which is basically Clarice writing this character, right? So tell us a little bit about, you know, about this, about either one, A Breath of Life or Besieged City, you know, in the realm of Clarice's work, you know. Why are they important? What is their place, I guess?
So one of the things that, so let me take what you just said about the relationship in Breath of Life between the narrator who speaks to the reader and then says, and the narrator is a man. And then the narrator says, I am going to create a character, Angela, and creates the character who is Angela. But if you really read some of the things that Angela says something like, oh, I remember when I wrote a book called The Besieged City.
Yes.
So then you realize, wait, hold on. So Angela is Clarice, because Clarice wrote The Besieged City. And so what's happening is Clarice is inventing a narrator who's a man, who invents a woman who is Angela, but Angela bears an uncanny resemblance to Clarice.
Right.
So it's a game of self-invention, right?
I love that. Oh my God.
And another thing that maybe, you know, for those of us who really know Clarice's work, this might be interesting. If you're familiar with Hour of the Star, Hora da Estrela, you know that there is a very deep resemblance with Breath of Life.
Yes.
Because it also has a male narrator who invents a woman character, right? Macabea. And if you're wondering how those two books are so similar, they were basically written at the same time.
At the same time, yeah.
You know, before she passed, while Clarice, in a sense, she was writing both books as she was dying of ovarian cancer. And I like to think of those two books as sisters. And Breath of Life is the weird sister, you know? It's like Hour of the Star is weird, but Breath of Life is the weird sister, you know, where there's less structure, there's more chaos, and there's more, I think, just pure kind of meditation. Whereas I think with Hour of the Star, we actually do have this sort of, there's a love story, there's a little bit more of a plot, you know, and a storyline. But Breath of Life is one of those books, and maybe you experience this with the show, where you almost feel like you can turn to a page and just start reading out loud, and you don't really need to know what happened on the previous page. Right? But Hour of the Star is more structured with a storyline. So there, you know, that's why I almost think of this as the sort of the sibling.
That definitely siblings. And as in the Breath of Life, I feel like it's a little bit more chaotic, like you're saying, more one of our choices for when we were researching, you know, because we are not academics, we are actors and directors and stuff like that. It was to really put Angela as madness, as like, you know, she says, she barks at God and she does whatever she feels like.
Yeah,
definitely like that. Now,
Johnny, Debs, can I just ask a question?
Absolutely, honey, go ahead.
Because I read The Breath of Life first in English, and then later, when I could find the book in Portuguese, I read it again in Portuguese. And I must say that what an amazing translation work you did with this book, because you really kept the strangeness, you know, the weird words to describe things. It's really amazing. I want to ask you about translating Clarice, translating this author, especially in The Breath of Life. As you said, there's no clear narrative. Everything's kind of loose. To me, it's like it's the sibling of Hour of the Star, but the cousin of Agua Viva. It's also this chaotic stream of consciousness. So I would love to hear you talk about translating it, like finding the words and finding the meaning, because what you did is really, really fantastic.
Well, thank you so much for saying that. That's very kind. This was this whole question of how to be faithful to the weirdness of her syntax. This is something that with the series editor Benjamin Moser, we just had so many sort of back and forth conversations about when did something sound weird and right, and when was the weirdness a mistake in the translation, you know, and that was always going to be the problem, but never to make our project in a way was never to make the mistake of trying to worry too much about if it sounded pretty in English, if the prose sounded elegant in English. There is a temptation by some translators to translate something she wrote and then to kind of say, but it's like chewing glass or something. Some of these lines are just the syntax is so weird. The way that the language moves can be so odd. But the thing is, you don't want to make the mistake of trying to bring her language into a kind of standard, what some people might call elegant or poetic syntax, because I think she was experimenting with the Portuguese language, and I think that she was making it do something that it didn't want to do originally, or that she was pushing her language into these places of discovery and experimentation. And I think as a translator, you have to honor that, even if maybe someone's picking it up and they don't know Clarice. They might say, that must be a bad translation because that sentence was just insane, right? Maybe it wasn't even a complete sentence. Maybe she's making up words, so there's neologisms. Maybe she's having a verb act like a noun. And you know, you have to be faithful to that, because she is trying in a way to break the language so that you can see something beyond the words, that she's intimating to you something in the silence beyond what the words can say. In the Passion that Idra Nove, who translated the Passion according to GH, there's this fantastic moment towards the end where the narrator, GH, says something like, I try to push my language so far to get to something that's just beyond what I can say. Mm-hmm. But you can never get there. You can always just sort of almost get there. And I think that for the translator, that was the difficult process of trying to bring it into an English that was faithful to her unconventional way of making the words move on the page.
Mm-hmm. I feel like you remind me now when you mentioned passion, according to GH, when she says, a vida se me é, a vida se me é. And it's such a hard sentence to translate.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes total sense. And also, sorry, like things keep coming to my mind.
Yeah.
As I speak, as I listen to you. That's why when they make a comparison of Clarice to Kafka or to James Joyce, mm-hmm. Even though we have to say those things so people can relate, you know, when you're introducing her, it's like, oh, it's like, you know, it's like this, it's more or less like that, you know. Mm-hmm. But it makes me a little upset because Clarice is Clarice, mm-hmm. you know. She might have those stream of consciousness that we think about Joyce and all that, but Clarice is Clarice, right? I mean, and that's the beauty. Like Andressa, I echo Andressa's words about your translation. You know, it's for us as actors, it was, and Brazilians, you know, to be able to read a translation in English that it is. Oh, that those are the sentences we wanted to say and be faithful to it.
Well, I'll tell you the truth. I think I translated it, like how many times did I go through the book and revise? Probably 7. You know, I'd start off with a basic sort of draft, mm-hmm. and then go over and a lot of times you're just tinkering with that one phrase, but it's one of those things that if you know, there are all these things that there are things that are about Clarice, and there are also things about the Portuguese language, right? Mm-hmm. So I remember once I was talking to someone in an interview about the phrase that she likes to use, o nada, o nada, you know. And it's sort of like, it's one of those things where, or she'll say, o Deus. And it's one of those things where to a Brazilian, I'm not sure it sounds that weird. You know what I mean? I don't think that's necessarily a Clarice weirdness. It's something that Portuguese allows a little bit more mm-hmm. than in English when you say, like, I am thinking of the nothing. So do you, eu tô pensando no nada. Right? And she'll say things like that. And you're just not sure if, well, is this a moment where you say, I'm thinking of nothing? No, that's not right. You can't say I'm thinking of nothing because she's not saying I'm thinking of nothing. She's saying I'm thinking of the presence of nothing. O nada. The nothing. Yeah. But when you translate it, you know, you read that and you're thinking to yourself, you know, probably someone's going to read that and think, the translator did something weird with that sentence, but you have to honor, you know, sometimes what Portuguese allows you to say more easily, and it just sounds weird in English. And then sometimes it's Clarice doing that thing that a lot of us who are fans of her work recognize, where you say to yourself, that's so Clarice, right? Mm-hmm. That's like, you recognize it instantly that that's something that she would say. And
right? It's so specific. I think that's what brings her specificity, her voice. The God is not just any God.
Yeah,
it is the God. Mm-hmm. And it's one of the things that my husband keeps saying to me, like, why do you guys say like the Johnny? You don't say
right.
Johnny. Yeah. Well, because it's that specific person, it's important for us to put that article in there. But I think that for Clarice, it's even more when it comes to that.
And let me just say just really quickly, like, because that question of o nada and o Deus, and the hard thing about Clarice Lispector is not translating the big words. The big words are easy, you know? When she has a word like pensamento, when she has a word like God, when she has a word like meu cachorro, like that, all that stuff is easy to translate. The hard stuff is the stuff that I think only other translators would understand. It's the prepositions, it's the articles, it's the little words that connect the bigger words. If that makes sense. That's the stuff that gives you a headache sometimes, because the way that all that, what you might call the connective tissue of language, the way it works in Portuguese is very different. And then the way it works in Clarice is even more different. Because I would do things like contact Brazilians, you know, poets, writers, academics, and I would say, look, I'm having trouble with this sentence. What do you think? Am I getting this wrong? And they'd say, like, good luck to you, because what she's doing here with Portuguese, it is really weird and really strange and interesting, but it's not, you know. Then I felt better, because then I knew that it wasn't me, you know, making a mistake. It was just that she was doing something so odd with her phrasing. And I mean,
and yet so simple if you think about, right?
She always says, I don't think I'm complicated, right? In one of her letters, she says, as minhas palavras são nuas. My words are naked. I don't try to make them embellished or more complicated. I try to put them together very simply.
And it is very simple if you think about it. It's like, we were actually talking about this yesterday at our happy hour. We actually read A Breath of Life yesterday. And we were talking about how simple it is. You know, the sentences, it's not like difficult to read a sentence, but the structure is like, what do you really want to say with this? And I think it's fascinating. And also, like, for me, that's one of the things that keeps her very classical, because she doesn't, Clarice was never reborn. That's how I feel. She was never, like, we never discovered her, rediscovered her. She always was and is. And that's what keeps that, then we're going to start talking about timing as well, you know, o tempo, and you know, her timing and the book's timing and all that. But
is it okay if I just read to you one sentence as an example?
Yes. Oh my God, that would be a present.
Right, because I feel like with what I'm saying, it might sound very abstract. So I'll give you one example of the kind of sentence that I think is so Clarice.
Please.
And maybe because we have native Brazilians in the room, you can talk to me about if you agree that it's also, you know, the kind of example we're thinking of. Okay, so this is from A Breath of Life in the first chapter. And she says the following: estar fazendo de propósito livro bem ruim para afastar os profanos que querem gostar. It's, you know, it's just like, to me, that's such a Clarice Lispector sentence. And the thing is, one of the things that's kind of odd about it is, first of all, that she's basically saying she doesn't want people to like her books. You know, that's not the point, liking, you know. She wants some kind of engagement with her work. But she's basically telling you, if you just want to like this book that I'm about to give to you, then you can just walk away now, because I'm not interested in you as a reader. I want something else, right? I don't want, and in a Facebook culture that we live in, everything is sort of like your aesthetic experience is based on liking or not liking, you know? So I feel like it's a really interesting challenge to us these days, because we just like to like everything. I like this book, I like this movie, you know, everything is liking. as though that can somehow identify your experience with a work of art. But the reason also that it was tricky to translate is because it's not just Clarice, it's also the Portuguese language. Like, she doesn't want people to que querem gostar. You know, in English, it just sounds weird to say it's not for people who want to like. Because in English, we can't say like without telling someone what you're liking. You need to say and this is also for the, you know, maybe the two of you know about this. A lot of Brazilians just cannot use the word it. It does, you know, like my mom to this day will still say something like, did you like the dinner? And she said, oh yeah, I like, you know, or it's like the word it is like, you liked it, because in Portuguese, you'll just say, gostei, oh, gostei, you know, but Americans can't say, I liked, right? I liked. So, but the other thing is that if I say, if I make it sound more like it was written in English, I lose the fact that she's talking about an action. It doesn't need an it. It's an approach. She doesn't want people to just like and to come with that attitude towards her book. Because in some ways, as you know, her books can be very challenging. Her books can be very disturbing. Her books can mess you up, you know? Like some of her pages are devastating. I don't know if that speaks to the feeling of liking what, you know, like, did you like that page with the cockroach? Did you like that page? I don't know if that's, you right? Like,
yeah, no. And so that brings me to the next question, which is getting this hook from, like, in this society in United States that we like things, right? We want to like things, right? And in United States, we want, I'm speaking more of United States. We could speak about the world, you know, of her body of work around there. But like in United States, in English, I guess, like, how does that get into this culture that wants to like things? Like, how do people say, Johnny, I like your book?
yeah.
an American, right? I like your book, and you go, okay, thank you, right? But how do you see? I'm not sure if the question is, how do you see it? What is your desire? What are your fantasies for Clarice's work in the United States? You know, since you are an amazing contributor to that. I encountered Americans that read Clarice and go like, oh my God, I have no idea what this book says. It's like, I don't like it. It's weird.
Yeah.
So, do you see where I'm going? I'm not sure if I formulated my question, but like maybe a reflection, a desire, a fantasy.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because in some sense you want, you know, when I teach at the university, I teach at Montclair State here in New Jersey, you know, in some sense, you want students to be interested in Latin American literature. You want them to like Brazilian literature because you want them to buy books and support an industry. And you want them to think of reading as something that they do not just for homework, but as, you know, as an experience independent of university. And liking is a shorthand for wanting to engage. But I think, but this gets us to what is Clarice doing with language? She's basically telling us that there is a language that we use every day. And then there is the language of someone who is what? She's not just using the language, she's going on a journey. And that's when you can't just fall back on the cliches that we use every day to get through our day, right? Because now there's something else that's happening. And when that happens, when you're reading someone like Clarice, all of your language starts to tremble. because you realize that you just can't say the things that you're used to saying. You know, it's almost like she won't allow you to just say, I like this book. You know, she doesn't allow you to have that experience of, how are you? I'm fine. How are you? I'm great. Tudo bem, tudo bom. Tudo bem, tudo, you know, it's sort of like, that's the language that we use every day, right? And then you read Clarice, and language no longer serves that purpose. Language becomes a kind of excavation project. It becomes, as she says in Breath of Life, I forget what page this is on, but she says, for me, writing is, and then she just puts a question mark.
Yes.
That's so Clarice, right? It's not even a word. It's a mark on the page, a question mark. And I feel like that's what happens with her, is that she'll take a word and she'll destabilize it and make it resonate with new meaning and new possibilities. So I don't know, you know, with my students, you know, I'll just say that some of them after class will say to me, I will never, ever subject anyone to Clarice Lispector, you know, what you did to me. And then I have another group of students who will say, oh my God, right? Like, thank you. Oh my God, like I've been waiting for this. I've been waiting to read something like this. Yeah. So do those students like her? I guess, you know, that's what we say, right? They really liked it.
I think it's an engagement of the soul, you know, like you said in the beginning, you have to be prepared, like the soul, you know, like she says, you have to be prepared somehow, you know, soul-wise or something.
There's that brilliant poem, The Archaic Torso of the Apollo by Rilke, where standing before a work of art, the last line of the poem is, you must change your life. And I think that's something that her literature asks us to do. It's not to just simply like, but to think of art as transformative. You are not the same person as you were before this book.
The transfiguration.
We almost out of time. We have like less than 4 minutes left, but I have one question. I don't know how complicated that is, but sometimes Clarice plays with words that have double meaning in Portuguese, and I wonder how hard it is to choose when you're translating which words and which meaning you're going to choose. So in your case, in the books you translated, how did you make that choice when you encounter things like that?
Well, there is the advantage that Portuguese is a Romance language, and sometimes those words are actually in English too, but at a different register. So so you're able still, even though it would seem like how do I say this? Like, let's say you have the word sentimento in Portuguese, and normally you would just say emotion in English, but you know that the word sentiment is there in English as well. You know, there's always a word in our language that we don't use as much that's a little closer to the Portuguese, you know, like pensar or pensamento, you would just say thoughts. But pensive is, in English, is closer to that word pensamento than the word thought, right? So, but pensive is not one of those words that you use every day, but think is, right? So a lot of times you actually find that going back to these sort of ancient roots, these connections, and actually allow you to find some of those double meanings. And then there's another, and I think this goes more to your question, like what happens when she's playing with something and you just can't capture in English the game of the double meaning. That happened in A Breath of Life. A very clear example is she plays with the word pus, which, you know, can be a verb, but could also be a noun, and a very disgusting noun, pus. Right? But if you say pus in English, you don't get the game with, because she plays with the word por and pus and pus. So the thing is, I had to basically reinvent that whole game with a completely different word. So you almost have to rewrite it in English, and you're far away from what she said, but you're close in spirit. So I use the word discharge, because the word discharge, the verb to discharge like your obligations or something. But discharge can also be, sorry, this is kind of gross, but discharge can also be pus from a wound, right? Or, I won't paint a picture, but it allowed me to sort of find a way to play the same game, but using what English offered for that. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, no, that's amazing. And yeah, thanks for that puzzle of words. We're running out of time, but I really, really want to thank you for joining us for this special celebration. And thank you so very much for your work and for helping spread Clarice's works and Brazilian literature in general. And again, congratulations on your brilliant translations.
Thank you so much for inviting me. And I just wanted to say that, it's a celebration of Clarice's 100 years, but really I think we understand that this is a celebration of a comunidade Clarice, Like I feel like in some way we're I'm doing my work with Clarice, you're doing your fabulous work with Clarice. And in a way, it's a chance for us to recognize each other, because her work is not just what's on the page. It's the way it moves around the world. It's how it inspires people. It's what people do with that experience of reading her. So in some way, I think it's so wonderful just to see everyone who's a part of that community share this day with her.
Os Claricianos.
Yes, os Claricianos.
Thank you so much, Johnny.
My pleasure. Thank you.
This is so, congratulations. I echo Andressa's words. Let us know about your manuscript. Yes, you can always put it on the chat box, your contact, or where we can find you. And I'm sure we can find you everywhere, because if we see the passion according to the breath of life and Besieged City out there, it's your translation. It's beautiful. Thank you so much. And stick around, because we are about to start our visual arts panel.